to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you. Never lose hope.
Here, Fred Shadows.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, friend.
Welcome to episode 467 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Friday, October 4th, 2024 in the evening. Coming to you from Nomergan, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From North Rend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good. From Tildersill, California, we have Magesa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. This week's episode is brought to you by our producers, Number Theory, Crash, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottle Caps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Grizzly Bear, May, and SSJ5 Goku. And by our patrons of the week, Graptasm and Moose MD. You can go to patreon.com/coinconcede to get perks like a thank you at the top of the show, early access to new episodes, one-on-one coaching sessions, and help support the show in the process. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. So, Life and Ladder. I'll go first because I can basically guarantee I've played the least Hearthstone. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm not abandoning the game. I'm just really, really deep in D&D right now, and waiting on new expansion. I don't know. I am excited about today's Decksplanations. I got a couple of games in, and it does seem fun, and it might pull me back for a bit. But I have been deep in the weeds, not only prepping stuff for the 2 campaigns I'm running, but also, and perhaps even more so this, I have been working on a redesign or revision of the Ranger class for 2024 5th edition D&D, because what they put out did not quite meet expectations or people's desires for the class. And part of that, I think, is because people have very different concepts of what a ranger is. Apparently Pathfinder 2e gets it right because it's very modular for rangers, so you can just kind of piecemeal together your perfect ranger archetype. I don't have those rules, but I'm kind of taking a page out of that book and using the most modular design approach to a class that D&D does have, which is the Warlock. And instead of Eldritch invocations, I'm using what I'm calling Primal invocations. But yeah, that's what my mind has been churning through in terms of creative process, has just been lots of design and researching other TTRPG systems and looking at videos that other people have put out and trying to come up with, what'll basically be a brand new class. It's a revision, but it's extensive. And D&D has this kind of cool thing that they have at times risked getting rid of, but fortunately did not, which is anyone can post content that's supplemental to D&D's rules on DM's Guild, and you can sell that stuff there, right? Even though your base game is still their product, there's a license that you can do that. So I got some commercially licensed artwork for the cover, and have been using this tool called Homebrewery to make it look nice and everything. I've been brushing up on some of my CSS skills, since that's what I have to use to write it in this thing. So that's been a whole process that has been occupying probably too much of my time. I was sort of counting on my daughter waking up earlier last night, because I'm regularly on sort of the first shift. So I'll feed her when she first wakes up in the night, and then I'll go to bed. I'm supposed to sleep before that. I didn't. Because many instances she has woken up, I don't know, 12:30 or something. And last night it was more like 3. So I was up far too late last night, just hashing out design stuff, and I'm maybe going to be regretting it.
See, most parents are thrilled when their kids start sleeping more through the night, and you are like upset because that's your cue to stop, and that's not happening anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it's a good limiter unless it isn't. So yeah, that's my insanity. How about you two?
My cat usually makes sure that I at least make movements towards going to bed at a certain time, and she's very reliable. I don't know how cats do this, but they have like an internal clock, and they know when it's food time, because I feed her like right before bed and then right after I get up in the morning. And so she's not super annoying about it yet. The older she gets, the more meowy she gets. So, and she's like 8. We probably have a long time of increasing meowing. We were talking about linear regression in a math class that I'm teaching. And so we were going like, there's usually a limited domain where it makes sense. If you extrapolate out forever, it doesn't make any sense. So, by the time she's 16, it will be continuous meow only at all times if trends continue. But yeah, so that actually does help somewhat to getting to bed. And my husband is the rest of it. She's like 5% and husband is 95%.
So that's regression to the meow instead of regression to the mean.
Oof.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I was encouraged by last week, so now I'm just getting more, more.
Yeah, someone linked to it on the Discord, and so
Yes.
Hat listened to it. So now you're like, Hat liked one of my, I thought, not spectacular puns, but it was like quick for once, which is not usually my thing. We're talking about someone was joking. Basically, short backstory, that day 9 video, just kill him, just effing kill him.
Yeah.
If the opponent's doing something weird, ignore it, just kill him. It's not so. It's such an entertaining video that my husband will quote that at me like every other week. Anytime that I'm like, I don't know what they're doing, he's like, just effing kill him. So, and then Hat goes, see, it's such good advice that you married him. And someone was like, listener, I married him. So then we had to make Jane Eyre quotes. I was saying, well, I have to say that, but I have to lead into it on the podcast. And Hat goes, yes, you have to err on the side of caution.
Oh boy. Yeah.
No.
So I said, yes, lest I bear the Bronte of criticism.
Oh my God.
No.
It doesn't end.
It doesn't end. No, there was more, but so that is my not particularly great pun of the week. Otherwise, at first I was sitting there going, what even happened this week? What happened this week is that my computer just mysteriously was not working on Wednesday. We were supposed to record on Wednesday, not Thursday because Rosh Hashanah. We were supposed to record Wednesday, and my internet was like not stopped, but just really slow, but only on my computer and not on Safari or through the terminal, but every other app. So Chrome or the other like podcasting app that we used to record, both like 2 megabytes a second, which was not really sufficient. And then Chrome was like, 200. Sorry, not Chrome. Safari was like, 200. Like, this is fine. So never really exactly figured out what the exact problem was, but it was quite the adventure. Thank you to everyone in the Discord who lended their advice in terms of what to do. I think it had something to do with I foolishly updated to macOS Sequoia before waiting for them to get the bugs out.
Oh yeah.
So,
I still haven't yet, and I usually end up doing it about when they announce the next major version of the operating system.
probably why that I usually wait longer than this too. I'm not quite sure why I decided to not do that this time. And so I think that was part of the problem, but it wasn't like the only problem. I had to turn a few settings differently, restore from. I had at least been smart enough to make a time machine backup before I upgraded. So if you are going to upgrade to macOS Sequoia, make a time machine backup first, just in case your internet stops working everywhere on Safari in what is clearly a conspiracy by Apple to make you use Safari. I think actually it's just Apple not paying enough attention to whether it works with things that are not their stuff, but
Probably.
and trying to limit probably the privacy stuff that they do somehow was like blocking everything that goes through. So, and yeah, looked at a lot of DNS stuff, got in the guts of the computer, went, at least I'm good at troubleshooting because otherwise we would never be able to record again. So I didn't really get to, it was too slow to play Hearthstone. And I had thought that Hearthstone was the problem at first and the HS tracker was the problem at first, which it wasn't, but I had like reinstalled it and then that kind of nuked my data. So then I was restoring my data from Time Machine. And then anyway, so I finally played some Pipsi Paladin, which we will talk about later, like today and yesterday, and a little bit of Rainbow Shaman. And basically my experience with Pipsi Paladin was, oh, this is really great. I'm doing well. Ran into some Reno Druid, not doing so well. Stopped running into the Reno Druids. This is going great. And then ran into some other slower decks, like a Reno Shaman, things not doing as well anymore. Either that or just not drawing very well against the big spell mages. Ran into a couple of those and just didn't hit what I needed to hit in my hand. That's definitely a winnable matchup, but not if you only
if you draw poorly or they draw exceedingly well. One of those two, sometimes you just can't get over that. So, yeah.
But it is a fun deck. I think I would play something faster if I weren't prepping for the podcast because that's my jam. But it is a fun deck and it has a lot of neat synergies and strategies that we will talk about in a second.
We already talked about all the fast decks, so
yeah,
exactly, because I usually pick the topic. Can you tell?
I mean, well, I on the other hand have jammed like 80 or 90 games with Pipsi Paladin.
Oh my god.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it is as close to a control deck as I'm finding without having to go down like some of the warrior rabbit holes that are there's no light at the end of those tunnels. So we were talking about what to do for the show on Monday, and then we're like, well, we haven't talked about this yet, and there's not a whole lot of news. We don't have a balance patch, so cover another deck before next week, because we're still in the kind of this calm before the storm of expecting the new expansion to be announced at some point. But it's not this week, so like we figure we'll try that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll try a couple games, and I watched some of Clark's video, which was pretty good, and that was enough to get me started. And then I just kind of, the first time that you play against a Painlock and they fill up their whole board with giants, and then you just respond with an Abaddus and make them all into 2/2s. That's a good feeling. I like that feeling. That felt like Control-y to me. So it's not quite what I would like in a control deck, but I think my platonic ideal of what I'm going to find in a control deck is not happening for a bit. Mm-hmm. So this is a love the one you're with type of situation. But yeah, so I've been playing a lot of that. We're going to talk about that in Decksplanations. That's really it's a lot of what I've been doing. I've really been enjoying the deck though. I don't know. I was in Lorinda's stream today, and they were like, "What? Why are you doing that to yourself?" Basically, they very clearly have not played the deck, and they do not enjoy playing against it at all. And I know that they haven't played the deck and that they don't like playing against it because they described it as a play the green cards deck, which is generally
that's not my experience of this deck.
It's not been my experience either, but I know that when Lorinda doesn't like losing to something, they see it as you play the green cards and you win. So but yeah, we'll talk about what you have to do with it. It is a little bit more nuanced and it takes a little bit of getting used to, and but it's got a bunch of different things going on with it, and I've been enjoying it. But that's been pretty much it. I've been I mean, we went over to my parents for the holiday yesterday, and and just kind of been trying to recover and trying to get myself out of the burnout funk that I've been in since that Hell project went live. And I've taken some days off end of this week and beginning of next week. The Monday is not great because it's for a 2-hour dentist appointment that I figure, well, I probably ought not to do much else after that anyway. That's not really a relaxing day off, but at least it's something. So I'm hoping to kind of get myself back. I've been feeling a little bit more myself today, which has been nice. So, but yeah, so we should probably get into news because there's not very much of it at all. And then we can talk about Pipsi Paladin for a while.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
And when I say that there is not a lot of news, the biggest news this week is that Thrall is in Waze. That is the news this week. That's it. So this was on Monday. Waze, if you don't know, is a navigation software that Google owns. I assume most people do, but there are people in other countries. I don't know if it's available everywhere. So,
I mean, people might not know that Google owns it because the convoluted mess that is our corporate capture
yes,
does not always reveal what sub-brands are owned by which major brands. But yeah.
Well, they also bought it wholesale, right? Like it wasn't something that they developed. They just bought it and then rolled it into everything, but kept it its own brand. So
right. But like they have Google Maps.
Yeah. So
they just decided, what if we owned the competing product?
What if we just got all of your navigation data, for when you're driving to work? Then, I'm sure they're doing lots of fun stuff with that. But anyway, that's a different podcast altogether. So they occasionally do like guest voices from different things. So it's the 30th anniversary of Warcraft this year. So
that sounds right.
25th anniversary of WoW or 20th anniversary of WoW.
One of those. It's the 10th of Hearthstone.
One of maybe all of them. Who knows? I know they put WoW in Overwatch or Warcraft in Overwatch for the same reason. So 20th.
We overshot.
20th of WoW. Yeah. Okay. We're part of Warcraft, but I refuse to acknowledge it. So that's there we go. But yeah, so you can have Thrall be your navigation voice. He will say things like a clever strategy to fool any pursuers on our tail. Presumably that's when it re-navigates you. Read, this is not the end of the world. May this journey bring us glory. So if those are things that you want to hear, if you want to hear Thrall reassuring you while you're in bumper to bumper traffic, then this is a thing that you can do. And usually those are for a limited time. So if you want to do that, you probably should experience it now because it's probably a limited time thing. Usually when they do those voices, it is. So, but that's literally all the news. There weren't even really any shop updates. We're very much in a calm before the storm scenario because we should be on track to be hearing about the new expansion basically any day now. We're almost a month out from the 0.4 patch, which is usually when the 0.6 patch comes out, which comes with the new expansion and the free legendary and everything else. So yeah, we should be hearing about that pretty soon, and then we'll bring that to you. If not, then we're going to have to figure out another topic for next week.
Well, there's one other kind of minor thing, right?
Yeah.
I had just put this in just once. We had talked about how there's the launch in China. We don't know exact numbers. I was listening to the Vicious Syndicate podcast and just thought it was worth passing that on for anyone who doesn't listen to that. Zacho said that he saw like 3 times more games since the launch in China than he would normally see at an expansion launch, even like a rotation. Wow. So there are a lot of people really excited about coming back into Hearthstone in China, which is awesome. Apparently they've been playing a lot of Reno Warrior, which I think might be because that is one of the gift like loaner decks that you can choose. And also not everyone. I don't love Reno Warrior, but many people have always loved Reno Warrior since its inception. If that's you, I'll only judge you a little tiny bit. That's okay.
Probably also just has the most legendaries. I don't know for sure if that's true, but I would not be surprised.
So it's worth more dust. Yeah.
Also, it's new there, right? Like
Yeah.
we've been playing Reno for what, like almost a year. Like unless there was one of these folks who were VPNing into other regions, like they just got Reno. It's like when Robin Sparkles in on How I Met Your Mother was like when the Canada got the 90s and the 80s and the 90s, right? Like it's the same thing. Like so and Reno has always been more popular in play rate than it has been in win rate. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that a lot of people would just like, that's the new shiny thing and they want to play Reno.
Yeah.
So,
because I mean, too bad for them, I guess, that they missed out on the 6-cost brand, but it was extremely popular for various moments. And I forgot they have all the cards from last year. So that I imagine people are very excited, not just to have the game back, but also for some folks, there's kind of this weird thing happening where maybe they were more free to play when they used to play or would be, but because of this sort of welcoming back thing to the region, they have like more cards than they've ever had. So that's cool.
Yeah, and Ben Hearthstone also posted like a picture of the China, just like the free tavern pass, right? Like not even the $20 one. Like the $20 one has cosmetics on every single node. But like he posted a screenshot of like 46 through 50, and like 50 is a portrait, 48 is a card back, 46 is 375 gold, 47 is 425 gold, and 49 is 525 gold. Sure. So yeah. So they're getting caught up. They're getting caught up real quick. So but anyway, so that's the news. And let's talk about Pipsi Paladin.
One last note on the previous thing. Donkey just commented in our chat that his previous highest number of games in a day was about 650,000 on Peril's release, and on Thursday, Donkey got quadruple that. So
quadruple, good lord. Okay, wow.
That is a lot.
To be clear, this is for the Donkey website, not like Donkey playing this game.
hsguru.com. Yes.
hsguru.com, which is a great website. Go check it out.
I don't think it's humanly possible.
I could believe Donkey was playing 650,000 games in a day by himself, but
just multiple accounts, all the screens at once.
I just envision him like in one of those, like, like in war games when they have like the whole bank of screens.
Every single one at the same time.
Like speed chess in the park,
Yeah. We'll have a kind of like, why am I blanking on the name of that show with Anna Taylor-Joy, where she's like a kid and she plays everyone in a room chess at the same time and beats all of them.
The Queen's Gambit.
That's Donkey. Queen's Gambit. Yes.
Queen's Gambit, our modern, what is it, Finding Forrester or something?
Searching for Bobby Fischer.
That one, right?
Yeah.
All of these films, I feel like their names are similar.
They all blend. All right, well, but Pipsi Paladin. So this is really Wicked's show here in terms of having written the show notes and played by far the most games with this deck. But if you are not familiar with this deck, it's also, if people are saying Linessa Paladin these days, as opposed to like back when we did theory crafting, they're probably talking about the same deck, right? Since this has Linessa as a tourist and as something that you can combo off of, but it's not an OTK combo deck, turbo your combo. It is somewhat slower, maybe somewhere between that and a combo and a control deck. I would say it's not like a Reno Priest control deck, but it's definitely on the more controlling end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And we have some lists in the show notes, both an image as well as a link to HS Guru with the lists, if that's more accessible to you, or you want to copy them. And Wicca, why don't you describe a little bit, like you have 3 lists here.
Yeah. They're pretty much this. I mean, the list is pretty set. There's not a lot of variation because there's a lot of kind of interlocking pieces. The the general goal of the deck, or the way that you ideally are going to, I don't even know about ideally, but like the flashiest way to close out the game is going to be with the big damage combo, which it's not as much all in on, like the old Linessa OTK combo was all in on damage from hand, right? Like you were throwing O managers and holy glow sticks at the face, and that added up to 30, and 30 was sometimes enough and sometimes it wasn't. This is using more minions to get chip damage in, and then your finisher is you're playing the one copy of Horn of the Windlord that you have in the deck, and then you're using Divine Brew. So Divine Brew is the drink for Paladin that costs 1, and it either gives a character Divine Shield, or if it already has Divine Shield, it gives you +1 attack. So what you do is you have the weapon up, and then you play Linessa, you play some coins because all the coins double. If you play O managers, you get 2 coins. Those coins double up also. And then you just start spamming Divine Brews on your face. And what happens when you do that is not only do you get double of the effect, so the first one will give you +1 attack, and then each subsequent one will give you +2, but because getting the next drink is part of the spell resolving, you will get another copy of that. So what happens is that the first one will give you it gives you 1 copy just normally that has 2 drinks left, and it gives you a second copy with 2 drinks left. And then the second one, when you play the 2 drinks, it gives you another copy with 1 drink. So assuming you have the mana to play everything, 1 fully loaded drink represents 13 damage, the first one. And then if you play both of them, it's 13 plus 14, which is 27. That's 27 per attack. So you can get a lot of damage, but you need to have coins set up in order to do that. Obviously, if you have the Horn of the Windlord, you have Wind Fury, that's more damage. You can get through a lot, assuming that there aren't taunts in the way or something like that. Plus, you also have O managers will do 4 damage apiece. Holy glow sticks will do 8 damage apiece, and those are discounted to 1 after you play the first Divine Brew. Though you usually have to use those to get through a taunt, but sometimes that's just extra damage. So, and you don't necessarily need the horn set up. Like sometimes you could just do it even without a weapon set up. Like that's just sometimes enough. So the problem is that you need to get to that point. You need to draw a lot of your deck in order to get there. So you have things like Hi-Ho Silverwing to get you there. You have Metal Detector and No Manager to make coins for you. And then you're using a bunch of minions to kind of help you stall long enough to get to that point, which is where Pipsi comes in. So Pipsi Paintuff is a 7 mana minion that's a 7 mana 4/4, and it has a Death Rattle that summons a random Divine Shield, Rush, and Taunt minion in your deck. So we have Divine Shield, Rush, and Taunt minions in our deck. What are the good ones? Well, Unkiliax is pretty good.
It's the flex slot.
Yep. Living Horizon's pretty good, and Amethyst is pretty good. Those are all cards that you want, right?
And Sandcastle.
Oh yeah, Sandcastle too, because Sandcastle has Rush, right? So those are your Rush, Divine Shield, Taunt minions. You will usually have drawn 1 or 2 of them by the time you get to kill off Pipsi, but usually you'll get 3. Sometimes you only get 2. It's fine, right? So you'll generally want to turbo Pipsi out. You also are taking advantage of Seashill to in order to discount them to be able to get either a Pipsi or an Amethyst out faster. If you get Amethyst early, generally you want to draw with it, but also sometimes you have a big board, or you'll get that off the Pipsi, then you'll buff your board, or you'll make the opposing board 2/2s, depending on what the scenario is. So like most of the deck is kind of spoken for at this point. You're also, I should mention, you're also using Conniving Conman, because less so with Pipsi, but getting a second Amethyst is great. Getting a second Living Horizons early is very good. And you also sometimes you just need a second copy of the weapon. You can get a second Sandcastle. There's a lot of good hits for Conniving Conman. It feels a little bit more fair than it does in Big Spell Mage.
a little.
A little.
Because these things are not 10 mana cards.
Right. Yeah.
You can also, if you're running Prismatic Beam, which has been in most lists, so it's not in the most recent BS list, but we'll talk about the flex spots. If you're using that, you can like clear a tsunami board with prismatic beam conman, for example.
Yep.
So there are things you can do there. I was even able to curve Living Horizon into conman on 4, which got an extra Living Horizon on the coin.
Yep, that's a good one.
Right? Because you start with more cards, and a lot of your cards, like your Miracle Salesman, when it dies, replaces itself in hand. Your Hi-Ho Silverwing, when it dies, replaces itself in hand. So your Metal Detector replaces itself in hand. So you have lots of ways to have a big hand. So if you draw Living Horizon, like, that's fine. You don't have to get it off Pipsi. It's actually really good for playing out.
Yeah, and the deck is designed so that, like, aside from the combo pieces, all of your Paladin cards are things that you want to be able to hit off of Conman. So, like, obviously you don't want to play a Divine Brew. You have to be a little bit careful when you're like that. You don't just like Divine Brew your face, which sometimes you'll do just to prevent some damage or take out a small minion or something. But you do have to be careful if you played a big thing not to like Divine Brew and then end up just Divine Brewing with a Conman. But almost everything else is a good hit off of it, and then the rest of it is either rogue cards or neutrals.
Yeah, you have a Mixologist, which is really flexible, of course, right? You can make a little bit more of a board for the tsunamis. You can get 3 damage faced, which you can double with Lanessa, and very importantly, you can get 2 damage AoE, which is super helpful, even if you have Prismatic Beam, and especially if you do not against something like a Pirate DH or really anything aggressive. Even like Rainbow Shaman has spiked because it was the meta breaker in the VS report yesterday. And they have like lots of just little things. But they have the little 1/1 pirates or like the little 0/1 taunts. The 0/1 taunts are so annoying as this deck.
Oh, they're obnoxious. Yeah.
So sometimes you'll take the deal 2 to everything and just hold on to it for the big Horn of the Windlord turn, because you need some way of clearing away those small taunts or even larger ones if you're doubling it. And Lanessa can take 4 damage AoE. So
yeah, and sometimes you just take like draw a card, give your minions +2 health. Like sometimes that's fine. Like it's very flexible in what it gives you, and it doesn't always give you what you want, unfortunately. Like that's why I don't love relying on just that as AoE against something like a Pirate DH, because you just don't have time to miss on it. But like in general, the flex slots, there are not many of them. Robocaller is sometimes one of, sometimes 2 of. This is something we were talking about before the show. How do you play Robocaller? You just play it. It is as long as you have headspace for it, it's Arcane Intellect at worst. In the early game. In the later game, you're generally playing it looking for whatever piece you're missing, right? So you want to look at your deck list and see like, okay, am I missing Horn? Am I missing Lanessa? Do I need a 5 or a 6? Do I need something else? Like you want to just make sure you're getting something that you need off of it. Sometimes that's going to take a turn or 2, but in the early game, it's just 3 mana draw, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
And you don't really care what it is. Yeah.
So late game, you need to whip out the address book. You need to make sure you're calling the right person. This deck you definitely want a tracker for because of Robocaller, kind of specifically. So you can see, okay, Sandcastle's out of the deck. That means my only 5 is Lanessa. So if Robocaller says 5, I want to do what I can to call her up. So
yeah. And one thing to point out, if you are planning on getting, let's say you have Pipsi in hand, you like have a seashell, you're like, yeah, I'm going to get my Pipsi out on 5. Don't like Robocaller your Unkiliax out of the deck if you have an imminent Pipsi.
Yeah, though it's not the end of the world, right? Like if you're getting like a Sandcastle into Living Horizons, or you're getting Ominous and a Living Horizon and a Sandcastle, like it's not the end of the world if you get Unkiliax into your hand. But yeah, like you do want to be aware of that. But I think that especially if you're just learning the deck, like just rip it. Like if you have just make sure you have hand space. Hand space is one of the biggest issues that you're going to run into with this deck, is managing hand space. But if you have hand space for the Robocaller, just play it. It's fine. So the other, sometimes we cut a Robocaller or the one of Prismatic Beam. There's one list that cuts one of the robocallers for Yogg, which I've been playing today, and that felt better. Just because like the second robocaller, you often don't get value out of it. Like the first one's very good. The second one, you're usually have some gaps in what's left in your deck. So you're not necessarily going to draw 3. Sometimes it's just draw 1, and it may not be the one you want. So like the second one's not great. So I don't mind losing that for Yogg, because like sometimes people will steal your Omidus, and that's really backbreaking. Or they'll have it on Kiliax that you need to be able to get out of the way. Or you're playing against a late game big spell mage, and you need to get rid of a whole bunch of water elementals, so you might be able to attack ever, right? So like Yogg's felt pretty good. The other thing that VS did is they cut the prismatic beam for Grifta. I tried like 15 games with that, and it never felt great. It felt like the having the variety of the curve is really important with this deck, just to make sure like robocaller coverage isn't the biggest thing in the world, but it does help having an 8 just to make sure that you're going to be more likely to get value out of it. And anyway, the Grifta, like if you're saving the Grifta for like a Lanessa lethal, then sometimes, okay, well, that's 1 mana deal 12. Like that can be okay. Or maybe it's just going to be a full heal. But it never seemed to work out that way. And the Grifta just kind of was hard to fit into the curve. So I didn't really like that. I ended up going back to just Prismatic Beam, because I felt like I was dying to Demon Hunters a lot more than I was able to take advantage of whatever the Grifta was doing. And the Grifta doesn't really have a lot of good defensive options other than like the heal 12, which is usually not as helpful with DH, because they're usually killing you in big chunks anyway. Like the taunt is okay, but they can usually get through it.
I could see the mind control being useful sometimes in slower matchups, potentially. Like if you're really, really just running into greed. This deck does struggle against like Reno Druid, as I alluded to at the top of the show.
Yeah. But I don't think that's helping you beat Reno Druid a lot of the time. It's like, I mean, the Yogg is there for Reno Druid, and that helps that matchup a little bit. But like, I found that like more often I was having trouble getting killed early than I was getting through. Like, if you sometimes can't get through a Reno Druid, that's because you just didn't draw your stuff in the right order. But like, more often, like you need your answers now against an aggro deck, and like Grifta wasn't giving those to me the way that Prismatic Beam was. And even like, there are some times that Prismatic Beam is good just with an Omidus, just to do a full clear. Or you like if you're dealing again against a Rainbow or a big Shaman, and they just like, or a Death Knight, and they just landed a Razzle Dazzler, then sometimes that's a way to, even if you're just getting through part of it, I felt that was more useful. But I mean, those are all options for you depending on how you want to play the deck. And generally I would try like whichever one has the highest win rate, and then experiment based on what you're seeing. But those are kind of your tech options.
I sort of find that something like that, swapping in Grifta, is one of those traps of like, you want to put something in to get a little bit better in a particular matchup, let's say Reno Druid, and maybe it wins you a few games, but like not percentage points.
Yeah.
And I think Beam is more likely to give you like a percentage point against aggro. So again, depends on like what you're seeing, but I sort of feel like, while Beam is less flexible in the sense that it only does one thing, it's reliable, right? And even though you're only running one, worst case scenario, when you need a clear, you need it against aggro. So being able to robocaller the turn you draw it when it says 888 and know that you're dialing up Prismatic Beam, that you're going to have it available because it's the only 8. So, I definitely prefer to have access to that beam. At worst, again, it's an 8 for robocaller to hit. So, just having more bases covers means you're more likely to get at least two cards, and sometimes 3 out of that.
And most things will have something that you want to clear. You also have Marin for later matchups, and also that draws. right? And can potentially get you something free that's a part of your combo, or just give you more, in worst case scenario, maybe you have like a Hail Mary Golden Cobalt after you run out of your deck. And now everything you have is useless. Obviously, that's not the best scenario, but Marin, as you would usually use him, can help you draw, can help you cheat stuff out, and just give you a little bit more late game stuff, like with the crown and stuff like that. One small note about facing Reno Druids, I ran into like 3 games in a row where I got mind control teched.
Yeah, that does happen, and that sucks. Yeah.
So maybe if you, don't hero power if you have 3 minions and you're facing a Reno Druid, just float the mana.
The fact that it chooses now, I think, is something we're still adjusting to.
Yeah, it's little things like that like you'll make some of those mistakes, but that's what's interesting about this deck, is because there's a lot of ways to fall on your face, but there's also like a lot of really intricate lines that you can take, and it's you don't really need to go all in on the damage combo, right? Like, you get a fair amount of chip damage, and like it's very easy to say, well, I need to have Horn the Windlord, and I need to have Lanessa and a bunch of coins and the thing. Like, you don't always need all of that. Like, do just still count for lethal. Generally, if I have Lanessa and 2 Divine Brews and coins, even if I don't have the weapon equipped, I'll just start doing it, right? Because like I almost never count, because the map takes too long. And by the way, the animations on Divine Brew are glacially slow. Yeah. So I mean, all the drinks are like, if you played any of the
Druid.
Yeah, the Concierge Druid, you'll know what this is like, because it's the same exact animation speed. It takes a really long time for the drinks to show up in your hand, and generally you just want to play whatever you have and just keep playing until like it stops letting you play things. But like, you don't really need to count. Like, if you have all the, like, most of the pieces together, as long as you have the mana to do what you're going to do, you probably have the damage. It's so, and even if you don't, like, sometimes you can just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like Mixologist, get 3 damage, and then Holy Glow Sticks for them for the rest of the following turn, and it's okay, right? Because like most of the damage is generally good enough if you're chipping through them. But you do want to make sure that if you're going, you need to commit to it immediately, because you are going to need most of that turn. Like, I had a game today where my daughter got dropped off at the front door in the middle of my Lanessa turn, and was like, and apparently still does not have a working key to the front door, because this is my life. So like, I had to stop in the middle of the Lanessa turn, go run to the front door and let her in, and then come back, and I barely did it. But I only did that because I committed to the turn to begin with, and then I knew what I was doing. But you do need to make sure that you're leaving yourself enough time to do that. And if you're running out of time, just make sure that you get your portrait to go towards the opponent's face. It may even take a few ticks to catch up, for the animations to catch up, but just make sure that you send your portrait at your opponent's portrait before the rope finishes burning. Because that's the one way, that's the mistake you're not allowed to make with this deck, is playing all the Divine Brews and then not attacking.
Yeah. And if you want to you can get a brief sense of like a heuristic. If you're like, no, I need to count, or you're counting like on the turn before your turn, you need 1 mana, right, per drink. And you can get +2 if you have a coin, or +2 if you have manager, because it costs you 2 and then gives you 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Make sure that you make room in your hand, by the way, before you play manager. If you have a full hand, you'll only get 1 coin back, and then it'll be very sad. Don't ask me how I know this. So play, some other coin that you have in your hand first, then play that. And then the Holy Glow Sticks, right, are each 8 damage. The drinks are +2, except the first one, so it's +1. And then each subsequent mana, you can basically just think every mana that I have left over is +2 damage.
Right.
Yeah.
Assuming that you started with a full
if you
drink.
have weapon equipped.
Or +4 if you have weapon equipped.
Yeah, and it's 13 if you have 3 drinks left on a brew, it's 13 altogether. that you're going to get. It's 1 to give the divine shield, and then it's 13. It ends up being 7 drinks that you get out of if it's doubled. So it's 13 altogether.
Yeah. So you can, especially if you're doing this on the turn before, how many coins do I have? That's mana. If I have a full drink, that's 7 mana for 13 damage, or 26 if you have the weapon.
Yeah. And if you are in a situation, because I made this mistake today, if you're in the situation where you have 3 mana and you have the choice of playing 3 drinks or playing a metal detector, play the 3 drinks. It's more damage because the metal detector is 3 damage for 3 mana. The drinks are, if you have Lanessa, that's 6 damage for 3 drinks, or 5 depending.
Five, yeah, depending on whether you already have a divine shield or not. Yeah. But obviously, if you have a choice between a drink and a holy glow sticks, right, do the holy glow sticks. Like, make sure you don't do all your drinks and then realize you ran out of mana for your holy glow sticks. So if you're just maximizing damage, what I used to do when I played a lot of Naga Priest was not just manage my mana. How many serpent wigs can I do? And then trust that the damage was there if the vibes were right.
Or that's basically it.
If it's like, I have to win now anyway, so it doesn't matter whether I have enough. I just have to go for it and see. So I just recommend like focus on how do I maximize the damage with whatever mana that I have, which is like first get as much mana as you can, send everything towards the face, spend all your mana on drinks that you have, except for make sure you save some for your holy glow sticks, or if you have like a deal 3 damage mixologist or something, or if you are running Grifta and you have deal 6. Make sure you leave mana for that. But just focusing on like maximize my damage is sometimes better than trying to count your damage, especially if your opponent's fast.
Yeah, it absolutely is better to count your damage, because if you count your damage, you will not have enough time to get that damage. Like you literally will not. If you try to do the math, you will not have time. This is very much a vibes-based OTK. And just you will get the sense after a couple of games, is this enough or not? And you'll just kind of feel it, and then you'll start going. And sometimes you'll be wrong, and that's okay. That's part of learning. But you'll kind of get a sense for, am I close or not? And sometimes you'll set up the weapon ahead of time. Almost nobody's running land destruction except maybe for like Arena Warrior that happens to have it in an ETC or something, but almost nobody's running weapon destruction. So you're generally pretty safe to set up the weapon ahead of time. You just need to make sure that you can get through a taunt if you need to.
Yeah, and you can do like little things like leave Sandcastle as a location if you're pretty sure you're going to have a minion that can go face with it. That's like 3 charge damage, right? Stuff like that. I mean, you can get in a fair bit of damage with minions. Unkiliax can stick around, do some damage more if you buff it with Sandcastle, right? Living Horizons can get in a lot of chip damage while they're sitting there in the early game, besides just protecting you. So one tiny thing, don't use Conman to double your Pipsi, because you probably won't get anything out of the second Pipsi.
Yeah.
Unless you've gotten really lucky and drawn like none of the things it will spawn. But remember also, like, it's a death rattle. It doesn't save you until it dies.
Right. Yeah.
Though using a holy glow sticks to kill it is perfectly reasonable. Like, you're not always going to have something to trade it into. And sometimes you just need to like go face with it and then hit it with a holy glow sticks, or trade off like a smaller minion, then holy glow sticks it. And that's fine. Like, go ahead and do that. That's a perfectly reasonable use for a holy glow sticks, just because the tempo you get out of that is a lot. And then that buys you a lot of time to be able to draw. But you also need to be really managing your hand space, because if you burn a piece of the combo and you need all that damage, that's going to be a problem. So just be aware that like a lot of your cards put other cards in your hand. So like the brews are not going to save you hand space if you play one of them. Like if you're playing out a miracle salesman, it's going to die. It's going to put a snake oil in your hand. If you kill something with the weapon and then you get a coin, that's replacing itself in your hand. So be aware of what's going into your hand, but also remember that Living Horizon discounts itself based on what's in your hand. So if you have a miracle salesman on board, or you have a weapon equipped, use those things, get the cards in your hand before you play the Living Horizon, because that's something that may allow you to do other things that turn, or just get it out earlier than you otherwise would.
And don't try to coin out the Living Horizon. It doesn't work.
It's the old mountain giant problem, right?
Yeah. And Donkey is also pointing out that you can divine brew your opponent's Pipsi to keep it from getting traded off, which is a cute thing that you can do in the mirror.
Yeah.
I've not actually even thought of, so that's news to me that I'm gonna have to try.
Something you all mentioned earlier, I think you said about using the sea shill to discount Pipsy.
Yeah.
But I think I should also emphasize that you don't have to sit like a dragon on your coins off of Metal Detector. Like, it is totally valid to just go, hey, I can play a turn 4 Pipsy here because I was on coin and I got 2 coins from the weapon and Pipsy's in hand. I'm going to give myself the 7 mana to play it. And that's really good. Like, turns there where you can get these big mid-game swings, honestly, against most decks are going to be pretty good. I was up against a Blood Decay earlier, and like, they were able to clear it eventually through like threads plus Corpse Explosion, but I still got a good chunk of damage out of that board happening much earlier in the game, right? Like, well before them being able to play Soul Stealer. So it sort of serves this purpose of both making hand space, because you're not just sitting on these coins that then prevent you from playing your Robocaller or your Wondrous Wand off Marin or whatever, but also just like playing for tempo, which is traditionally good.
If you do that, then you won't need as much damage out of the combo.
Yep.
That's the other way to think about it.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to have a full 30 if you did the chip damage. So, and there are other, you could always seashell then the Lanissa later so that you get a couple extra Divine Brews on your combo turn or what, But yeah, using your coins is good. Coins are flexible. That's part of the point of them. So just to make space in your hand is fine. And if you need to use the occasional Divine Brew early, especially, it depends partly on your matchup. Like, if you're facing aggro, just survive. It doesn't even, just survive.
Yeah. I'll sometimes just like Divine Brew my face at the end of a turn just to make it so that like they have to, like, especially if I've just cleared a board against like a Demon Hunter, I'll sometimes just like Divine Brew my face so that they can't like get a big weapon swing on me. Right. Or if they get like a cane or something like that like it'll soak a hit. That's fine. And or using 2 of them just to get rid of like a minion that's got 1 health left is okay. Or even just like enabling a Holy Glow Sticks, like that's fine too, right? Like being able to play like one of the Divine Brews, shield your face, that use another mana for the Holy Glow Sticks, so you can heal and remove a minion. Perfectly okay. Don't worry. Like against the aggro decks, they will hit themselves a lot, right? Because Painlock is just going to do it because that's what they do, and Demon Hunter is going to run their face into your minions a lot. So you're probably only going to have to do 10 to 15 damage against them anyway. So you don't need the full combo. You just need to not die. If you can not die and you can stabilize, you'll generally get there against aggro. But so you don't need to worry about the combo. Like whatever incidental damage you can get at the end of the game is going to be enough a lot of the time.
Yeah, Shaman is probably the exception there, right? Because they don't do a whole lot of using their face to clear.
Yeah, but they generally take a little bit longer than Demon Hunter, and they give you a couple turns to set up typically.
And that's one where you just want to watch out for those 0/1 frog taunts.
Yeah. And Amethyst also is like, depending, you need to think about how you're using Amethyst, like which mode you're using when you play her, because like if you're against a slower deck, you probably just want the draw 2. But if you're playing against something like a Painlock, like setting everything to 2/2s that's GG a lot of the time. And sometimes you'll have like other things that'll be alongside her. So like if you have like a Living Horizon and Unkiliac because you just got her off of Pipsy, then buff your board, right? That's more healing if you're getting it on the Achilliacs, and just makes it harder for them to get through those things. So you just need to think about how you're going to do that and like what order you want to do them in. Also, if you can con man your Amethyst, then you're chilling a lot of the time.
If you can con man Amethyst, if you can Sandcastle to give Amethyst more attack, that may not seem intuitive because you're not getting any use out of the rush, and Amethyst is almost certainly never going to get the chance to actually attack itself. But because she has taunt and often ends up like protecting the other minions that she has given +2/+2, let's say, they have to go through her first if they're another board-based deck. And so her actually having attack and being able to kill the things that they are sending in to do their bits of 2 damage at a time is very potent.
You could even, do the combo of you have her, you have Sandcastle, you buff the board, then you give her +5, right? Because you use the sand, you attack them with Sandcastle, then give her +5 with the location, then clear something else. I mean, that could clear a huge board. So it's really a matter of what's my opponent's plan and how am I combating that? And are they just trying to kill me as fast as possible? Then I just need to hold on. And a little bit of what you draw. Like if you cheat out a bunch of minions early, maybe that's a big part of your game plan, and spending some combo pieces to make that happen faster, keep those things alive for longer is worth it. Versus if you kind of didn't get any minions, you might be looking more, or you're facing something that has a lot of health, you might be looking more at a bigger combo turn.
Yeah. And Sandcastle can also clear 3 minions, right? Like if you have a minion that sticks, or even if you don't, right? Even if you just have like a hero power, like remember that it gives the minion rush and then you get another attack after you use the location. So that's 3 damage 3 times, which against the aggro decks can do a lot of work. So just be aware of that. And also, if sometimes you want to just like leave Sandcastle in location form for a turn, if you're not going to have anything to attack with the third with the third attack or the second attack, because then it's vulnerable as a minion. It's much harder to remove it as a location.
Yeah. So unless you have good reason to believe, it's protected by an Amethyst and they're not something with over the top damage, so I can just leave it as a minion so it can go face next turn. In most situations, if you're not going to be able to get it in location at the end of the turn, you might just want to leave it in location form at the end of the turn. You can still essentially get its attack damage to be charged by using that location next turn on anything that did stick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're not even necessarily missing face damage that way.
Yeah, and then against control, like you're going to have to maximize your damage, which means you're probably holding Robocollar till it hits a 6 to try to get the weapon, because that's like one of the things you can't tutor. You can't tutor the weapon, and you can't tutor Lanessa. So you're looking for either a 5 or a 6 on the Robocollar typically. I mean, if you can hit 5 and 6, even better. But you generally want to try to get one of those off the Robocollar to make sure that you have the combo pieces in place. And like, there are things that you'll do, like, well, Metal Detector can just go face and it's fine, right? Like just getting whatever damage you can get in. Get the tempo minion plan is still fine. Like you still want to cheat out of Pipsi. You still want to get an early Amadeus on board. Do whatever you can to just get pressure and just keep pressuring them to not let them draw into their answers. But just, get going. And if you're playing against a deck like Big Spell Mage, or I guess some of the Death Knights are still running the weapon Discover so that they get the Freezy weapon.
Sure.
Then just, if you have an opening where you can attack, just take it. Just take whatever damage you're going to get, because you may not, especially against Big Spell Mage, that might be your only chance to attack against that turn. So just take the damage when you can get it, and then you figure out another way to get the rest of it.
Cool.
Yeah, I think the only thing we didn't cover is Mulligans.
Oh, that seems important.
Yeah. And generally, almost all the time, you're keeping Salesman, you're keeping Hi-Ho Silverwing, you're keeping Seashell, Pipsi, and Metal Detector. I like keeping Living Horizon only on the coin, because it takes too long to get it out on the play. Like you have 2 extra cards in your hand when you're on coin, because you have the 4th card and the coin. So that discounts it by 2. And I like keeping Robocollar on the play, because for the same reason that you have less cards in hand, so it's easier to play the Robocollar.
Mm-hmm.
And generally I want the other things in my hand. I want some decent hand and some sort of curve. If I'm keeping the Robocollar, I'm not just going to keep the Robocollar by itself. I'll usually toss that. And obviously Prismatic Beam you want to hold against aggro. You might be tempted to keep a Mixologist against aggro also. That's not the worst idea in the world. It's because that 2 damage AoE is important, but I would want to keep the other stuff first, just because like Hi-Ho Silverwing just trades pretty well on its own. And, Miracle Salesman helps you find the thing. Maybe Seashell I wouldn't keep if I don't have something to do with it.
Yeah, Pipsy or Amethyst. Actually,
Yeah.
Seashell plus Amethyst can be like I wouldn't keep Amethyst on her own. Right, but
I think if you don't have Pipsy, Amethyst is a pretty good backup because
Yeah.
you can, if you get her down on 5 with Seashell or coins from the weapon, then being able to do her draw and have pretty decent odds of hitting something that's getting majorly discounted, I think is potentially quite worth it, especially if you can then follow up with a con man or something and do it again. Like, that actually is one that you can cheat out and it feels good to con man. So, not as good as Pipsy, and certainly throw it back if you do have Pipsy because you want her in the deck to get pulled out. But if you don't, I think it's kind of the next best thing, just because there are some really big hits when you're considering reducing to 2 mana, like getting a 2 mana Marin, even 2 mana Lanessa, obviously great for combo. 2 mana Pipsy, right? If you didn't have her already, like there's a lot of really good hits.
Probably especially versus a slower deck, and especially if you have a Seashell or you have a weapon that you expect to be able to use and get coins so that you can get her out early. But that's a good point.
Yeah, if you can get a Lanessa for 2 or 0, you may not even need that many of the coins, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for today's show. A short one. We don't have these often, but when we do, it's usually on light news weeks like this. So we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at Concede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/Concede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.concede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.concede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. And if you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. So, Coin Concedes. I guess so. Why don't you start?
I'm going to coin concede to the wedding photographer, as I just, right before the show, I was like 2 minutes late because I was like, oh my gosh, I just got the photos back. They look so good. Very excited. I was starting to download them and, see how I can put them up and stuff. And then I realized I super don't have time to do this because I have to record the show right now. I had been, even though I did pretty well with this deck overall, I would say I had like a 4-game loss streak right before the show. Was not helping my mood going in. And then this really cheered me up. Especially got some really good ones of my husband, which I hadn't had as many pictures of from before. So yeah, thank you to her. She was really nice. And we had tried to get her to like eat with us because she was there until like 7:30. So we're like, we will feed you because we don't want you to not get food and then be here until 7:30. But she was like, no, I'm gonna eat over here. But she came out, she ate like really fast, and then she came out and got a lot of pictures during dinner. And so I appreciate it. She was very nice. And scouted out all these places. It was kind of like on the cliffs at the coast. And she found places that were both pretty and possible for me to access with heels and a dress, which was tricky. But heels and dress were not ruined, kind of miraculously not ruined, not even visibly messed up. So,
and also you didn't trip over them and fall to your doom, so that's also a plus.
Yeah, there was one point where she's like, get as close as is comfortable here. And my husband was like, I'm gonna be on the side of the cliff. I'm like, well, you don't go too close either. He's like, well, I'm in reasonable shoes, okay? I'm not in heels. So we did not get too close. There was like a big bush between us and the cliff.
It's fine. I've been playing lots of cliff dive and I never get hurt. I'm completely okay.
Cliff dives has taught me you hit the water last.
Yes.
Wicked?
I'm going to coin concede to Clark Hellscream because his guide was very helpful in being able to get started with this. Like, this is the kind of deck that you figure out from experience, but if you don't have somebody explaining to you at least like what you're aiming for, then it can be a bit of a hard road. And people are not really doing deck guide videos anymore. So his was very good. It explained pretty concisely at least like what you should be shooting for, and then the rest of it, is enough to be able to figure out on your own. So I'll try to put a link to that video in as well, because it was a pretty good explanation it was an older list, so it was a couple weeks ago, and of course he's been saying this is the best deck in the world for the past month, because that's the deck he's playing right now, right? So that's every deck. I sometimes worry because every deck that Clark's playing at the moment is the best deck ever, but this one actually was very good. So
that's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
Look, you gotta play the algorithm game. So
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna concede to all of you listeners for bearing with me and the fact that I know I've been sort of less dialed in than I sometimes am. But yeah, believe me when I say fear not. I will not be like leaving Hearthstone or anything. I still enjoy the game. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm excited for when we get like new expansion stuff to talk about.
I mean, we all occasionally get hyper focused on something that's not Hearthstone occasionally, and sometimes that pulls us away, but it doesn't pull us away forever. So,
yep.
But anyway, that's going to do it for this week. So until next time, keep calm and cheat out your Pipsi. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All life must end. I yield for now. I concede. Well fought. I concede.
You win this one.
The victory is yours.
You have bested me.
I give up.
You win this one, friend. You win this time. I choose death.